big believer that we as people go through different seasons in life. And I gotta be honest, right now, I am in a bit of a season of burnout, and I have been for the last few months. Now, I won't bore you with the nitty gritty details, but overall, 2025 has just been a bit of a bitch of a year, and as a result, I feel a bit burned out and just overall uninspired with my work. And while this is a topic that I've never really talked about on my channel, I do think it's an important one to explore, and that is how to prevent, or at the very least, cope with burnout, which is especially challenging given the fact that Turo feels like a 24/7 job. Now, first, I want to preface all of this by saying I am absolutely not a pro whenever it comes to dealing with burnout or preventing it. And like many small business owners, I have a tough time creating a healthy work-life balance. However, I am trying to get better, and I think in that effort of improving this aspect of my life, I've come up with some tips and tricks that may help other Turo hosts accomplish the same. Now, the first thing that we have implemented with our fleet, particularly with my husband and myself, is that we do not work on cars or do vehicle maintenance on the weekends. Given the fact that we have a shop, a lift, and we do our maintenance in-house, it can sometimes be hard not to work on cars on the weekend, especially if we have multiple cars out for maintenance. However, we have in the last couple of months implemented a soft policy of not doing any maintenance on the weekends. Sure, there are scenarios where something unexpectedly pops up, or we may do something that will set ourselves up to hit a job running come Monday, but for the most part, we aren't actually working on cars on the weekend. Turo itself is somewhat of a 24/7 operation between checking in cars, cleaning cars, and communicating with guests. It's hard to turn that part of the business off, so instead, we turned off the maintenance part when applicable. On a similar but different note is the actual management of our rentals. We operate a 24/7 fleet, so for the most part, guests can book our cars at any point in the day, whether that's 7 p.m., 7 a.m., 2 a.m., or 2 p.m. They can book it whenever, unless we have the calendar blocked off, of course. And the way that a lot of fleets operate, and ours isn't any exception, is the fact that we are really busy on the weekends. From a rental perspective, we are consistently booked out 100% on the weekends, and many of our cars end up getting booked out on Friday and then end up getting returned either late Sunday or early Monday. This as a byproduct has made weekends quite a bit slower than the week for us from a workload perspective, but one thing that we do in addition to that is we block off cars on the weekend if we know that we don't want to go check them in, or if we know that we aren't going to be able to. For example, it is extremely common for either HP, myself, or both of us to work a couple of hours on the weekend cleaning cars, checking them in, and checking them out. But let's say, for example, on a random Saturday, we know that we want to be done working by 2 p.m. Even if we have cars that are getting returned later than 2 p.m., we will block those off to prevent them from being booked. That way we can easily go out, go do something, run errands, chill at the house without feeling the guilt or pressure to go check in a car because it gets unexpectedly booked. We just simply block these cars off or snooze them to prevent anyone else from booking, and we will just deal with them the next day. This may sound like a simple action, and in execution it absolutely is. However, there was a bit of a mental shift that occurred whenever we started doing this on a consistent basis, basically coming to terms with the fact that yes, blocking off a car at 3 p.m. because we don't want to deal with it until the next day will absolutely affect our utilization and our bottom line from a revenue perspective. It's well worth it because it gives us a needed break, it creates a better work-life balance, and it ends up having a bit of an ROI in the long run. And it really has helped with burnout and has assisted in the feeling of feeling like we are constantly on call depending on when guests are going to be returning and picking up cars. On a similar note is remote key exchanges. Now, if you've seen my channel or videos before, then you know that I am a big proponent of remote key exchanges, and I will be shouting this from the mountaintops until I turn blue. Remote key exchanges are when you have a lockbox method set up for guests to pick up cars at their own time rather than meeting your guests in person. And this means that as long as a car is prepped and ready to go, we can facilitate a booking anytime, even if we're at dinner, laying on the couch, or at the grocery store. Now, the bulk of our returns happen in the morning, which works out really, really well because it means that our work is very front-loaded on the first few hours of the day, but then it means the rest of the day we can kind of do whatever we want, whether it be work on other things, go to the grocery store, sleep, chill, whatever the case is. We can do those things without having to worry about going to the shop or going to our lot and checking in cars because all of those cars are already checked in. And so this means that we can theoretically tell ourselves, okay, we're going to clean cars until noon and then we'll be done. And in that case, most cars can be prepped and ready to go, and we can facilitate any straggling bookings remotely because we don't meet guests in person. Which brings me to another adjacent point, which is to prep cars on the return, not on the booking. This may sound like common sense to some viewers, and personally, I thought it was as well, but I have spoken to some people over the years, in fact, many people over the years, that will actually prep their cars once they're booked. They won't prep them once they're returned. And whenever I've talked to people who've used this strategy, they've expressed that sometimes they can run into issues because the car will be dirtier than they expected, it'll smell, it'll have an odor, it'll need gas, whatever the case is, and this can sometimes cause issues from a time perspective because prepping the car will take longer than they actually expected it would. Now, I am a strong believer that prepping your cars for Turo should be one of the first tasks that you do throughout the day because once you have them prepped, ready to go, and you have the photos, you can kind of go about your day, and those photos are going to be good for the next 24 hours. As I mentioned with my point and remote key exchanges, we try to keep our cars prepped and checked in and have this done first thing in the morning to either prepare for them for the trips that they already have booked or to have them ready for potential bookings that could come through. And this is by far the best way to do this. Because again, as I mentioned, you do this front-loaded work, you do it once, and then your cars are ready to go for the rest of the day, and you can facilitate a booking at any time and any place because you utilize remote key exchanges. I really can't imagine a reality of having to drop what I'm doing in order to prep a car for a rental because it was unexpectedly booked, and a great way to avoid this while not leaving money on the table is to simply prep your cars first when they are returned, not waiting for them to be booked. And last but not least, one of the biggest things that I've been doing, particularly over the last probably 6 to 8 weeks, has been paying significantly less attention to my metrics. I recently made a video talking about metrics and what my team and I are doing in order to improve our metrics and regain power host. And while this is still an effort that we're working on, I know for me personally, it isn't something I'm focusing on nearly as much as I was a couple of months ago. Don't get me wrong, I still absolutely care about the overall customer service experience, but I am finding myself looking at reviews and my metrics significantly less than I was even back in like May and April. Reviews and metrics have always been a huge contentious point with me. I really do not like looking at reviews. They give me anxiety, and historically, I've even carved out a couple of times a week where I will actually look at reviews and I will avoid it at all other times because they cause me so much anxiety. But as of late, I've even minimized that down to maybe one time per week. And instead, the tactic that we've been using as of late is basically just trying our best to provide the best experience with our guests, with good communication, clean cars, and well-maintained vehicles, and really what they review us after that is their prerogative. Believe it or not, of all of the things that I've done or tried to do over the last couple of months in order to cope with burnout, probably the most effective one has been just not paying as close attention to metrics. And instead, I've just been accepting the metrics for what they are. I dispute them whenever applicable. And again, we do try to provide the best experience that we can possibly give. But rather than focusing my energy on metrics and 5-star reviews, I'm instead focusing on the things that matter, like getting more bookings and increasing our utilization and making more money. Truthfully, I think one of the biggest takeaways whenever it comes to experiencing burnout with your Turo fleet is the idea that blocking off cars or snoozing vehicles frequently is not going to hurt your long-term metrics. We are big believers in snoozing and blocking off cars. Most of the time for us, it is because of maintenance or because we're working on the car or because we want a guest to be able to extend freely without getting booked out by another guest. But as I talked about throughout this video, we do oftentimes utilize both snoozes and calendar blocks in order to block off cars in the evening or even in the afternoon if we don't personally want to check them in until tomorrow. And we have really had no negative impact on our ranking, our overall bookings. And while we definitely do probably miss out on a booking here or there, it hasn't been something that has substantially affected our bottom line, even to a noticeable degree. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it. So make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.